At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, how's it going? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital, a leader in next-gen core services, and a big shout-out, as always, to subscribers of the podcast, whether you're on Circle, Patreon, or Facebook. Thank you for everything, and also all of you who are watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. I appreciate you very, very much. This has been an excellent week. This is the week of the 23rd, and I've been out here in Colorado teaching, and I'm now currently within Aurora 911, here with the 911 professionals and recording some episodes. We'll be highlighting the center as well here in a moment. Dude, they've got a disco ball up in this piece. They also have an ESA, an emotional support animal that is it's a goat. How crazy is that?
Yes, we do. She's here right now live.
Yes. And my guest here today, as we're wrapping up these episodes and everything, is Marlene, and she is an emergency specialist 1 with Aurora 911 here in Colorado. How's it going?
Hi, I am doing great. How are you?
I'm doing all right, except my voice. I mentioned this a couple episodes ago. My voice is a little bit gaga, kind of.
No, you're so wonderful. I'm like, wow, I'm impressed with this intro.
Well, I appreciate it because I've been talking for the past couple of days, and I was talking to my kids on the phone, and they're like, Dad, what's wrong with your voice? And I said, I've been talking all day for a couple of days. I was like, I'm having fun. I said, but I'm losing my voice a little bit. Now, kind of talking about a voice, you have an excellent voice as well on the radio and everything, but I have a question, and this is what I was saving when we were talking in the beginning. Do you end up getting some of those callers who just call so that they can like hear your voice or whichever?
So I haven't had that specific experience, but I did have a caller until this day. I remember him specifically. Actually, I went to high school with him. He did not know it was me when I picked up the line.
Oh, no way.
He had questions about whether he had a warrant or not. So that's something we don't provide over the phone with my agency. I don't know how others work. But he's like, wow, you have a sexy voice. And I'm like, I mean, I didn't know what to say. I was appalled. I was like baffled. I was like, what? Like, what are you know? And I was pretty new actually back then. So I didn't really know what to say. I just told them like, hey, you know, this is the information that you need to find out if you have a warrant or not. And I just simply disconnected the call. It's kind of crazy because he's actually still dating the girl who he was with in high school. So for him to make that comment towards me, I found it a bit disrespectful, but
that is hilarious.
Got to stay professional. And
right, exactly.
Keep it pushing.
See, and that's probably one of the hardest things as well is when you're working in an area that either you grew up in or you live or whatever, you're going to end up taking calls from people that you know, right?
Absolutely. I've taken several calls from people that I know. They don't necessarily know off the bat it's me.
Right.
And I don't typically go out and say, hey, I just took your call. No, but yeah, I've taken several calls. Actually, I took a call, maybe I want to say probably like 2 months ago.
Yeah.
One of my best friend's family, so her father, all her family essentially had this huge family dispute. She wasn't there, but she's like a sister to me. So it was tough. It's very, very tough. Yeah.
Oh, geez, I can't imagine. And then you're kind of walking that line, right? Of whether you say your name,
Yeah.
or you let them know who you are, or you just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
And I say that because, and I was talking to one of your coworkers, Rena, about this as well. One of my aunts called one time, and I'm on the phone with her, and she's freaking out and everything because there was someone who was potentially breaking into a house that's next to her. And I'm thinking in my head, do I say who I am or do I not? Because, it's one of two things. You're going to say who you are, and either they're going to be, they're going to feel comfortable, or they're not going to answer any more questions because now you know their business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is a fine line. I specifically chose not to say who I was,
Yeah.
just because the situation was very chaotic at that point. So I didn't say anything. But after the fact, my friend told me, hey, my parents just called 911, and little does she know that I took the call.
Right.
So yeah, it was tough listening to, people who I grew up with fight and have this, huge dispute. I had a hard time personally. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah. And with this call that, that I was talking about with my aunt, I told her who I was. I said, Tia, I said, it's Richie. And she goes, ay, mijo. Like,
and that happens a lot.
Yes, she just completely changed it. And it was, so that actually was a lot better. But, I've had friends, and, some of them would ask my name, and I would say, well, my name is Ricardo. But the good thing, though, was that in high school, nobody knew me as Ricardo. They probably didn't even know my name was Ricardo because everybody called me Rich. And so I would say my name, and they would just say, "Oh, well, thank you for helping me." I'm like, "Well, little do you know, we went to high school together."
Right.
And I mean, I didn't say that, but in my head, I'm like, "Yeah, you didn't know this." But for you, you've been in dispatch for about 6 years now.
Yes.
How did you get involved in public safety to begin with?
So to be honest, I always kind of been obsessed with the 911 calls.
Yeah.
I always thought it was cool, right? Like I would hear every YouTube video you can think of 911, all these calls. And, I don't know, when I was younger, I was like, oh, I want to be a 911 dispatcher. It sounds cool. And you kind of grow up and you're like, oh, it's 911. They're so cool. They know exactly where you are and they can send help quickly. And, now I know things are very different. We don't necessarily know 100% where you are, right? But I don't know. I just kind of thought it was something cool to try. And I started working for an alarm company. I was there for like 3 years, and it was emergency dispatch, nothing compared to this. I mean, over there, we would just kind of monitor buildings and alarms, like fire alarm systems, burglar systems. And then I'm like, why don't I just try for 911? I already have this experience. Let me apply. So I applied to almost the entire state of Colorado. I mean, I applied to every agency I can think of. I end up having two offers, and it was Aurora and Westminster. And I decided to come with Aurora. I'm very familiar with Aurora, so I'm like, might as well. Wow. And I'm here now. So I'm glad I did. It's changed my life completely.
Well, so what was it like in the beginning? Because did you get a chance to come and do like a sit along, or did you just go through the process and then you're coming in? And when you came in, what was that like for you? Was it what you thought it was going to be, or was it seeing all these monitors like, oh my God, what is this?
I feel like it was very different. A lot of people, they know you work for 911. They're like, oh, like the movie The Call. Is it just like that? No, it's completely different.
Right. Yes.
So for me, I had done a lot of research. I've heard a lot of calls, and I mean, you can see it on the internet, but actually living it here, it's completely different. So first I went through the process, and then my last step was actually to have a sit along. So I sat with somebody. Yeah, it was completely different. It was, at that moment, we didn't really have a lot of exciting calls. We just had more of just welfare checks or like a theft here and there, but nothing too crazy, no shootings or anything like that. So I wouldn't say it was too exciting at that point. It was very different than what I thought it was going to be. And then now, with my experience, oh yeah, when shit hits the fan, it hits the fan.
Yes, it does. Yes, exactly.
It takes a whole village.
Oh man. And so you go through your training and everything, and you start taking calls. So like now it's your turn to start taking calls. Ooh. What is that like for you?
To be honest, and every person who sits with me, I always tell them, for me personally, it took me a year to not come to work nervous. A year is a long time.
Yeah,
I came to work so nervous all the time. I wouldn't necessarily say I was shaking, but I was extremely nervous because I didn't know what I was going to get. Was I going to get a hanging, a shooting, somebody who died? Throughout my training, I never got a shooting or a hanging. So, obviously you go through the training to be able to handle these type of calls. But when you're actually there, it's just you and your computer and your knowledge and your thoughts. So it's very difficult. So I was just nervous. I didn't know what I was going to get. And I pushed through and I asked a lot of questions. I mean, everybody who was here knows, like, I would just stand up and ask a question. And then eventually, I got, I guess, just the hang of it. And now, I mean, you name it, I take it, everything. I've done a lot.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah. So you go through all of that and everything, but also you, like a couple others who have come on as well, you speak 2 different languages then, right?
I do. Hablo español.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about right there. So you translate as well on some of the calls. And when I was talking to Reina, and I don't know if it's the same or for you rather, but when you're taking these calls, like you're translating in your head and now you're typing and everything, does it ever mix you up, or is it just like, it's just because you're just doing it all the time now?
To be honest, it doesn't, because I've been doing this since I was young.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still pretty young, 28, but when I was younger.
Right.
So my native language, obviously, it's Spanish. I'm Mexican. My parents are Mexican. I mean, I was born in the US, but Spanish is my native language.
Yeah.
I didn't learn English until I was in school. So I mean, with my family and my friends, I would speak English and Spanish, and I would just, text both English and Spanish, or my mom would be talking to me in Spanish, I'll answer in English, or vice versa, right? So it hasn't been difficult for me because it's something that I'm used to.
Yeah.
But yes, so I would speak to the caller, and I do till this day. I speak to the caller in Spanish. Actually, my department, which is absolutely great, our ProQA system, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So ProQA, we have a Spanish version. So we're able to use that for our Spanish callers because, I mean, yes, I was born speaking Spanish, but it's very different translating specific words, in the 911 center to Spanish. So that is extremely helpful for our Spanish speakers here. We do have a couple, as you met, Mario, Reina.
Yeah.
So I use that to my advantage. So we're able to use that, and the answers that I select are in English, but the question is in Spanish. So I just, push through, to be honest. And then whatever they tell me in Spanish, I'll type it in English. And personally, for me, it's not difficult. I'm used to it. So
dang. See, okay. So I'm jealous because I'm also 100% Mexican and everything. So are my parents and everything. However, so my dad was born in Texas. My mom was born in Michigan. They're fluent. However, they taught us English first. So with my abuela and everything who was living with us, our Spanish came out of us, out of necessity to get to be able to live with grandma, with granny. And like, she would look at us and she would tell us in Spanish, like, you need to learn how to say some of these things because I don't know what you're talking about. So we would, but I think she knew more English than she let on, because sometimes we would go to the store and she loved like deli meats and stuff. And she would go and she would come back with all the deli meats and cheeses that she had. And we were like, how did you do that? And she would just go like this to us. So we were
she probably just wanted for you to learn Spanish as well.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So, but I always tell people my Spanish is a little bit more broken than it is fixed. And I still, so I was the only one in dispatch who would do any translating and stuff. And sometimes people would call in and they would go, Ricardo, you need to translate. And I would start talking to them in English first, and then like just kind of listen to them. And sometimes the whole conversation would be in English, and they would say, how is it that how would they? And I would say, they just had a thick accent. And some people, they weren't even like Spanish speakers. They just had a thick accent.
That has happened to me too here.
Oh, yeah?
People be like, hey, I have a Spanish speaker on the line. I get on the phone, it's not Spanish. And I'm like, I'm sorry, please, hold so I can connect an interpreter. But that has happened. It's kind of crazy.
we had someone once who, so I was on backup phones, had someone on radios, and then my partner who's on main phones, she sent me a message and she goes, I think you're going to have to translate for this. And I said, okay. And I was listening to the phone, I was monitoring, and I was like, that's not like a Spanish accent. Like, that's not anything like that. So I sent her a message back, and finally she gets kind of flustered a little bit. And she goes, sir, I can't understand you. I don't speak Spanish. And then she goes, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. And I'm looking at my other partner. I'm like, I wonder what happened. Yeah. So like good coworkers, we played the playback.
Right. As one should.
Right. Yes. To see what it was. Yeah. And so when she yelled that, the guy that was there, the caller, he ends up yelling back, I don't either. I'm Indian. So while she's
that is
while
crazy.
she's on the phone, I keep playing it back, and she can hear it, and she just threw up her hand and like flipped us off. But yeah, it's stuff like that, you know. And so you have that experience, so that's awesome, because like for myself, and I was telling Rena this, that there was some words that I didn't know. So I was basically asking, so when you ask, you know, are there any weapons involved? I was asking like specifically guns, knives, like I was going through all of it. I'm like, what is the damn word
Una
for
arma.
weapons? Yes.
¿Ha habido alguna arma involucrada o mencionada?
Exactly. Yes. I had to Google that. But also, like,
you're not the only one, because we've been doing it over here too. I'm like, oh Lord, I
well,
don't know what this means.
even the simplest word of an address, I would say, donde vives, and there, and because in the area that I was at, if we just simply asked that, like friends or whatever, they would say like an address or whatever, and they would on the phone, they're telling me the city. I'm like, damn it. Okay, what is it? So then I Google it and like dirección. Like, really? I'm like, that's what it is? Yes.
Yep. I got you. Spanish 101.
I know, dude. Yes. And but I didn't know this. So like during some of those calls, I'm like Googling right away as she's, you know, whoever is yelling in the phone, and I'm looking it up. I'm like, okay, I got it. And then go through it. And luckily, you know, it never delayed anything.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I will say this story really quick before I ask you about, you know, some of the other ones early on that you've had. My very last day in dispatch, I was on radios, and I am talking to my partners, and I said, you know, and there was only about 30, maybe 40 minutes left of my last shift. And I said to them, you know, the only call that I have never had to take out of all of these 13 years that I've been in dispatch was having to translate a medical. And
that's hard.
I put it out in the universe, and a call comes in a little bit after that. And my partner on phones, I hear her saying, un momento. I'm like, no way. This
today.
cannot be happening. And so I hear her put, you know, the person on hold, and she stands up and starts laughing. And I thought, you know what? Okay, you got me. I thought it was something. She goes, no, you need to translate Spanish. I don't know what it is. And it was a medical that I had to translate in Spanish.
Those medical terms, they're hard. That's why I'm saying the Pro QA in Spanish, amazing for medical and fire. Because half the shit, I'm like, what is this? I don't know.
Well, and that's another example of don't put that out in the universe, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's like you're testing fate.
It does.
Yeah. So, you know, for you, when you first got in and everything, and now you're taking all these calls and stuff, do you remember some of those early calls?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention this yesterday in the conference, but I was a bit shy. So, I mean, here I am now, right?
Okay, hold on. Before you mention what you're going to mention, you weren't too shy towards the end, because I was like this. I had my shoulder up.
Oh Lord, that was hilarious. I was dying when I got home too. I kept thinking about it.
Yes, so funny. Anyway,
hilarious.
Go ahead.
Yes, so this is more like a sad call.
Yeah.
And I did want to I wanted to write it down, but I don't know why I didn't, but here I am now. So it's a very, very sad call.
Yeah.
And till this day, I think about it and I'm like, why don't I share it, you know, to people out, you know, who haven't done this job or, you know, are considering of doing this job and all of that. So it was 2 months after I cleared. So I was, you know, fresh dispatcher. I mean, I was barely getting the hang of things. Well, I mean, obviously I knew how to take a call and help a person, right?
Yeah.
But again, we don't know what we're going to get. A hanging, a shooting, right? We don't know. I get this call and I can still hear it. And it's been 6 years since that call and I can still hear it. And I pick up 911, what's the address of emergency? Nothing but yelling. A female hysterical. I mean, I've never heard of somebody having that cry or, you know, you can feel her pain through the phone. So I was like, hello, you know, what's the address of emergency? And she just kept yelling, my baby, my baby, my baby. And she kept saying help. So 90% of that call, 99% of the call, to be honest, was help, help, help my baby. And I had my partners try to get subscriber on it because back then we didn't have rapid SOS. I'm sure you know what that is.
Yeah.
We only had a phase 2. So if the phase 2 wasn't working and your caller wasn't cooperative, and if there's no priors on that phone number, then it's up to you, right?
Right.
It sucks because what do you do, right?
Yeah.
Your resources are not working. What can you do? So I was like, ma'am, like try to remain as calm as possible. What's going on? Essentially, I didn't get much other than my baby, and it was pretty bad. Like, and it may not sound as bad right now over the phone, but when you sit behind that desk, behind that keyboard in that chair, and you have your headset in your ear and you hear these screams, it's crazy. So what had happened was she ran over her baby, her 1-year-old baby, and killed him. She put him in the car. She realized and she started driving to the hospital thinking she had time. She realized the baby wasn't breathing. And then at that point, that's when she called me and I started hearing all of these screams for help. And I remember I was trying to get an address. I'm like, ma'am, I need to know where you are. And then she's like, I'm driving. And I did tell her, I was like, well, I need for you to pull over somewhere safe so I can send help to you. And then she's all like, she gave me an intersection. And I know, we can't really give much information on that, but she gave me an intersection. And then she said, it sounded like she was going to say shell.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of sounded like that. She gave me an intersection and then she said or something like that. And then the call dropped. So there is a Shell gas station at this specific intersection. Mm-hmm. So I use my best judgment and I'm like, we're going to go here. We have nothing. We don't have a GPS. We don't have subscriber yet. We don't have anything. And thankfully an officer was literally around the corner. They pulled over and they found her.
Wow.
I know. I did have to go home after that. Not necessarily because I did anything wrong, but to be honest, I couldn't function after that. And I just kept thinking about that call. What's going on with the baby? What happened? And obviously, they started like a DUI nurse and they just try to, I guess, remove any, I don't know how would I say this? Like they're trying to, I guess, determine what happened, whether the mother was under the influence or things like that. Essentially, I was able to my department did allow me to go to the briefing. I was able to speak with victim services, CAC, which is the Crimes Against Children Department. The chief was there. Everybody was there. They were able to speak to me. And when my supervisor, she was a dispatcher, I was a call taker. And they basically did tell us that it was determined to be an accident. And there is a difference between the screams of a mother losing her baby compared to a scream of somebody just getting beat up. And obviously that's not good either, but there is a difference. And those screams, I kid you not, sometimes I'm in bed, I'm laying in bed, it's 3 a.m., you just randomly wake up and I think about it. And people may not believe me. They're like, oh, she's joking or no, I honestly think about it. Until this day, I think about it. What happened to her? Because not only in my thoughts, you have to live with you losing your child. And on top of that, living with you're the person who caused it. I don't know. I don't know if that's me judging or not. And I feel terrible for the lady. But what happened? I did get invited to the funeral. I chose not to go. I didn't want to put a face to it.
Yeah.
And I thought that by now, I would be fine. And I believe that I am fine, but I do think about it often.
And I think as well, you talking about and thank you so much for sharing that too, because those are hard calls, man. And they stick with us, but also, you sharing that, there might be someone out there who has had something similar, and to hear you talk about it might inspire them to talk about it as well and open up, having had it buried for so long or whoever is listening. But these stories help everybody that's out there. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I hope so. To people who are out here thinking about maybe becoming a dispatcher, it changes you completely. Yeah. I would definitely say it changed my perspective in life, but I wouldn't have it in any other way. I love it. I mean, just sitting behind that desk, knowing that I'm helping a person or, just doing something. I know that at the end of the day, I made a difference, whether it's just with one caller or two, or even just getting one thank you a day. Yeah. You don't hear that. You hear people yelling, screaming. They hate the police. They hate dispatch and we're the worst. But at the end of the day, we're there to help them and we do. So that's a satisfaction that nobody can ever take away from me. So to be honest, I do admire what you do now because a lot of people, they leave and that was it. No, you yourself took so many calls. You helped so many people and nobody can ever take that away from us. Because even if I were to quit or, you obviously, started this new journey, nobody can take that away from you. Nobody can take away from you that you helped that mother, that you helped your family, that you helped people who needed that assistance. Like nobody can take away from me that I helped this lady, get help for her baby, unfortunately.
Right.
And it hurts my heart. I wanted to do CPR. I wanted to do so much and I couldn't. She was just not there, able to mentally to be able to help me. Thankfully, I was able to get her help quick as soon as we could.
Yeah.
And we got there fairly quickly. And to this day, I live with that. And I hear her screams and people may not believe it, but I could still hear her screaming. Yeah.
You know, I can, as we're going into the wrap up of this episode, and it's been awesome to have you on here and learn more about you and you know, hear some of your calls and your journey as well. I can tell and I can feel it. And I've said this with everyone else that's been here as well, but especially with you, that you genuinely love what you do. And the people that call in and the people that help. And I think that's why some of them stick with us as well. It's not so much that haunting part, but it's because we love what we do and we kind of take a bit of them with us and a bit of us is left with them as well. Mm-hmm. And you know, whether you end up going into being like a trainer, CTO, or whatever down the line, or anybody else that you talk to, you have these stories and these this experience to be able to share with them. Mm-hmm. So I asked you, as well as this class yesterday, this question towards the end, and I'm going to ask you now.
Yeah.
So as we go into the wrap up of this episode, which has been awesome to be here with all of you, if you could go back in time with all of these years of experience that you have, to talk to yourself in the beginning, not to change anything, but more so just to kind of talk to yourself, to give yourself some advice, you know, whether it be, you know, to hang in there or stick with it or whichever, what would you say to yourself?
I would say to myself to manage my stress in a way that I could.
Yeah.
I used to almost be 400 pounds and I lost over 180 pounds.
Congratulations.
And I started working out and doing all of that. So to be honest, working out has helped me manage my stress and my weight and all of that. So I feel that managing my stress any way I could better. I didn't do that at the beginning. Mm-hmm. I was extremely stressed. I mean, this whole year I was coming to work stressed and nervous. And now that I guess self-care, I guess you can say, now that I manage my stress by working out and doing different activities, I feel much better. I mean, now I'll come to work happy and I'll sit down, I'll take your call, I'll take the shooting, I'll take it and I'll go on break and I'll have a laugh with my friend. And it doesn't mean that I'm laughing at this horrible call. You just can't take it with you. So right. I would just say to manage your stress as best as you can from the beginning. They do tell you during training, manage your stress, but you know, you don't necessarily, I mean, personally, I didn't do it until, you know, it got progressively worse. And then now I feel that I'm doing pretty good.
Awesome.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it did. No, that was perfect. Yes. Yeah. No, thank you so very much. It's been an honor to be here with you and everybody else and everything that we've been doing these past couple of days. So thank you for what you do. I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming to our center and sharing your story as well. It's very impressive.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been an experience.
Right. I bet.
It's been something.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. So for everybody who's watching and listening, if you have any comments, questions, or you ever want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and it's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that is wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on social media, and the easiest way to do it is simply go to links.co/WTT podcast, and that's links with 2 i's.co/WTT podcast. The shout out to Aurora 911 for bringing me in. This has been awesome. Also, shout out to In Digital, a leader next gen core services, because they sponsor these episodes, and shout out to the subscribers. Wouldn't be able to do this without all of you and those watching, listening, supporting, and sharing. You can see this on Facebook, YouTube, as well as X and LinkedIn Live. And then you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone, and we will see you all in the next one.
You just listened to a Code 7 Network podcast. If you have any questions or would like to be a guest on the show, send an email to wttpodcast@gmail.com.